My name is Lena. I was born in a small town in southern Germany, in a family where religion simply did not exist. We never went to church, never prayed, never talked about God. My parents used to say, "When you die, it's over, so just enjoy life while it lasts." I grew up believing that. I loved science, especially physics. I felt safe with numbers, formulas, and experiments. To me, science was the only way to understand the world. I used to think that religion was a crutch for people who were too weak to face reality. When I saw believers, I would quietly tell myself, they need stories to feel better. I don't. In my third year at university, I received a scholarship for 1 semester in Malaysia. I didn't know much about the country, except that it was a Muslim country. I remember sitting with my friends before leaving and joking, "I'm going to see how religious people live in the 21st century." We laughed. I had no idea that this trip would turn my life upside down. When I arrived in Kuala Lumpur, I was exhausted from the flight. That first night, as I was unpacking in the student dorm, I suddenly heard a sound unlike anything I'd heard before. It was the adhan, the call to prayer. I didn't understand a single word, but something about it went straight into my chest. I felt goosebumps on my arms. Then I shook my head and said to myself, "Relax, it's just a sound. Nothing more." The next day at university, I met a Malaysian student in one of my classes. Her name was Aisha. I had a lot of stereotypes in my head about Muslims. I expected her to be strict, maybe uneducated, maybe closed-minded. But she was the opposite. She was calm, always smiling, very intelligent, and top of the class. She spoke kindly to everyone. One thing caught my attention. When a male student tried to shake her hand, she smiled and said, "Sorry, I don't shake hands with men," in a very polite way. I waited for people to laugh at her or get angry, but they didn't. They respected her. This confused me. After a few days, I started asking her questions. At first, I asked with a bit of arrogance, "You're smart. How can you believe in a God you can't see?" She smiled and answered, "Actually, it was my mind that led me to believe in God." That sentence stayed in my head. My whole life, I thought reason and faith were enemies. She was telling me they could be friends. One night, Aisha came to my room holding a small green book. She said, "Lena, you love science and research, right? Will you read this with the intention of searching for the truth, not with the intention of mocking it?" I asked, "What is it?" She said, "It's a translation of the meanings of the Qur'an." I hesitated. Then I thought, I'm a scientist. I should not be afraid of reading a book. So I took it. I opened it randomly and started reading. The first verses I read were about the creation of the heavens and the earth, about the universe being once a joined entity that was then separated. I stopped. This sounded very similar to what we studied about the Big Bang. I stared at the pages and thought, how could a book from the 7th century mention something that science discovered only recently? I didn't jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore the question. From that night on, I read a little every day. I focused on verses about the universe, the stars, the alternation of night and day, the water cycle. I was searching for mistakes, contradictions, anything that proved this book was just human writing. But I didn't find what I was looking for. Instead, I found a strange harmony between what I knew from science and what I read in the Qur'an. Not in detailed equations, of course, but in the way it spoke about nature, purpose, and order. At the same time, I kept watching Aisha and other Muslims around me. I saw honesty, patience, modesty. I saw people who made mistakes, yes, but who always tried to return to God. I started to ask myself, if this religion is false, Why does it produce such beautiful character in so many people? Inside me, a war had started. One part of me was slowly becoming convinced that Islam might be true. The other part was terrified. I thought, if I accept this, I'll have to change my life. What will my parents say? My friends? Who will I be? Some nights, I went out to the balcony and looked up at the sky. The stars were so clear. For the first time in my life, I felt that this universe couldn't be an accident. Without planning it, the words came out of my mouth. Oh Lord, if you exist, guide me to the truth. I froze. I, the rational atheist, was suddenly calling out to a Lord I had denied for years. But that call came from a place deeper than my pride, deeper than my theories. One Friday, Aisha invited me to the campus mosque. She said, "You don't have to do anything, just observe." I covered my hair with a scarf she lent me and sat at the back of the prayer hall. When the women started praying and then went into prostration, I felt something break inside me. They put their foreheads on the ground with complete humility. A thought flashed in my mind. If there is a creator, this is where a human being truly belongs. Not proud, not arrogant, but humble before the one who made them. After the prayer, I spoke with a woman who taught Islam there. I poured out all my questions. Why does evil exist? Where is justice? Why are we created? What about free will? Is religion just control? She didn't get angry. She answered calmly, one by one. She showed me how Islam views this life as a test, how ultimate justice is in the hereafter, how God is just and merciful, how worship frees you from being a slave to people, money, or desires. At the end, she said, "Lena, I can't put faith in your heart. I can only explain. But you must ask yourself honestly, does this book sound like the words of men? Or is there something divine about it?" That night was the hardest night of my life. I went back to my room, opened the Qur'an again, and every verse felt like it was talking directly to me. I realized my problem wasn't a lack of evidence. It was my ego. I was afraid to admit I had been wrong. I was afraid of losing my old identity. I cried a lot. Then I stood up, alone in my room, and I said in English, from the depths of my heart, "O Allah, if you are the true God, I believe in you. I believe that you created this universe. I believe that you sent prophets. And I believe that Muhammad..." Then I played a recording on my phone that taught the Shahada in Arabic. With tears running down my face, I repeated, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah." In that moment, I felt a peace I had never known before. It was as if the noise inside my head finally stopped, as if my heart, which had been searching and running in circles for years, had finally reached home. My journey after that was not easy. My parents were angry and confused. Some friends distanced themselves. I struggled with the hijab, with praying on time, with learning a new way of life. But every time I put my forehead on the ground in prayer, I knew I had made the right choice. Today, when I look back, I smile at the old me who thought science and faith couldn't coexist. Science taught me how the universe works. Islam taught me why it exists and who is behind it. I was a German girl who thought she needed no God, but God reached me through the very thing I trusted most, my mind. And through that, He opened my heart.